day of peace and celebration turns into a nightmare for a Texas family.
A search for a missing boy grows more desperate by the hour
After a 12-year-old boy vanishes on Christmas Eve.
We need to find this little boy.
We're going to be going in some areas today that are pretty treacherous.
Pretty good.
How does a 12-year-old boy vanish into thin air?
My daughter was at work, and he called at her job and said it was an emergency. And then when she got to the phone, no one was there.
And a holiday miracle come to his family as they desperately search for their boy.
If you can hear Granny, Granny loves you, little fella. Hang in there. We're looking. We're trying our best, baby.
I'm Jean Casares of In Session on the True TV network in for Nancy Grace tonight. We learned just minutes ago Texas authorities have issued an Amber Alert for 12-year-old Jonathan Foster. They are interviewing his parents separately. They are continuing the search tonight by foot and by ATV for this little boy that was so excited for Santa Claus to come and bring him his presents. Last time he was seen was on Christmas Eve. I want to go out to Joe Gomez, reporter for KTRH News Radio, Talk Radio, Houston, Texas. The timeline is very murky here, but start from the beginning. When was he last seen?
Well, right now we're seeing conflicting reports. Was he at his babysitter's house on Christmas Eve, or was he last seen at his stepfather's house? But right now, police say that he was last seen somewhere in his neighborhood on Christmas Eve in the afternoon. He then subsequently vanished. His mother received a desperate phone call at work from a mysterious person that said they had an emergency. But when she answered the phone, that person hung up. Little Jonathan Foster has been missing since Christmas Eve. 3 days now he's gone. Police are interviewing both his mother and his stepfather now separately. I mean, they also suspect foul play. That could range from kidnapping to murder.
All right, Rupa, Mickle, and Amy, Nancy Grace, producer, here's what I'm confused about. All right, the little boy, Jonathan Foster, precious, precious little boy, was at the babysitter's because his mother's at work. Okay, I get it. I understand it. But was his stepfather at home where they lived together? Then why is he at the babysitter's?
Right. So we know that at some point, Jonathan Foster was at his babysitter's, but then he left, and the babysitter only lives a few doors down from where he lives, where Jonathan Foster lives with his mother and stepdad. So he left the babysitter's house just to go grab a video game. And so now what we understand is that he did make it to his parents' house. And he was last seen there by his stepfather. That is what we're understanding. Now, Jean, the other thing is that it's not surprising that they are separating both the mother and the stepfather and interviewing them separately. In fact, earlier this evening when I had police on the phone, they did indicate that because there were such conflicting stories from various members of the family, the grandparents, the father, the stepfather, the mother, they need to figure out what the exact timeline was and what the story actually is. And in fact, you know, as typical, when a child goes missing, family members start pointing fingers at each other, which he said some of that was going on from the mother's side of the family against the stepfather. There was some mention of maybe domestic squabbles or issues. Again, no reports, no police reports of domestic violence, let me emphasize. And again, no reports of Child Protective Services being over there at the house.
And everybody, what Rupa is telling us tonight comes from the Houston Police Department. So that is on the record. To Radha Mikulanemi, who is an internal medicine physician coming to us tonight out of Washington, D.C. Doctor, I want to ask you about attention deficit disorder. This little boy had that. What are the challenges for him at this point, being away from his home, what he's used to, and any medication he would be on?
Well, unfortunately, children with ADD actually are a little bit more hyperactive. They're much more sensitive to their environment. If he was medicated, but he's likely off of his medications right now. So unfortunately, if he were abducted, he would be in quite a traumatic mental state, I believe, at the moment, as would any child, even one without attention deficit disorder. So it's unfortunate.
All right, to Kelly in Kentucky. Hi, Kelly.
Hi there. I just had two questions. First question is, I was curious, how old is the babysitter? Second question is, could the stepdad have kids from a previous marriage or whatever that might be jealous?
You know, Kelly, we see so much of this. We see so much. Look at Kyron Horman. in Oregon. That, we believe, could be a motive for murder in that case. Let's start with your first one. How old is the babysitter? You know what? We don't know. We don't know anything about the babysitter, but let's go to the attorneys. John Burris, defense attorney out of New York tonight. Potentially, could there be criminal charges here? I'm not talking about civil charges. I'm talking about that she neglected her duty to a point that it raised it to a criminal responsibility and criminal liability.
I would think not, particularly given the fact that this child was seen, reportedly have been seen at his house with his stepdad there. Whatever responsibility she had, she probably was negated at that point in time. Plus, remember, he only lived a couple of doors down. I mean, it's pretty hard to give criminal negligence or kind of criminal child endangering in a situation like that. I think the focus has to be on the fact is he was back at that house at some point in time with his stepdad seen or someone else. And more importantly, you have this mysterious call. I don't think that anything like that has anything to do with the babysitter at all. So I really think we've got to stay focused on what happened after that child made it to his house and tried to get whatever he was trying to get from the house, and the stepdad saw it or some other neighbor saw it. So I think the police are doing the right thing by trying to develop a timeline. But keep in mind that the parent or a parent saw that child after the babysitter did, and therefore I don't think the babysitter has any responsibilities after that.
John Manuelian, defense attorney out of Los Angeles, agree or disagree?
I disagree. Honestly, I think that because of the babysitter, it's why Jonathan Foster's missing. Had the babysitter kept Jonathan Foster at the house, or even had the stepfather kept Jonathan Foster at the house, he may be alive today or found today.
Well, you contradicting yourself.
I want to go out to Cheryl McCollum, crime scene analyst, cold case, Pine Lake PD. You know, every time we hear about abductions, I want to ask Pratt Brown about this too, but when we hear about abductions, they're little girls. We don't hear about little boys that often. Am I right, or am I just missing it?
Well, I mean, not as often, but I mean, certainly we have them. I mean, in Georgia, our Amber Alert is named after Levi, a young fellow that was, you know, abducted off his bicycle. And that's part of the problem I'm having here tonight is you've got a police department, an entire department, that it takes 72 hours for them to convince this child was abducted from the state, Gene, that invented the Amber Alert. I don't understand the delay. Why in the world would they wait that long unless they did not believe in the beginning that this child was abducted?
Pat Brown, criminal profiler, author of The Profiler. Your thoughts on what Cheryl's just said?
I'm with Cheryl on that one because I think they are looking awfully hard at that stepfather. That's what I have to believe, which is why the Amber Alert didn't go out. Because, yes, if he had left the stepfather's house, was walking down that area near a train track and scrubby kinds of things out there, I mean, it is a good place for a predator. Watching kids on a daily basis, seeing this young boy running back and forth, it's a great place for a predator to grab him. So why weren't they thinking that direction? So I'm guessing when they started talking with the stepfather and the mother, something wasn't adding up there, and they're like, wait a minute, something happened back at that apartment. And we're not looking for a stranger abduction.
Joe Gomez, reporter, KTRH News Radio, and everybody, we've got to find this little boy that has been out without a coat for 72 hours. But Joe Gomez, who made that 911 call? Do we know?
We still don't know yet, Gene, but as you mentioned, it has been freezing out here in Houston. I mean, typically the temperatures are, ranging from the 60s to the 70s, but over the past couple of days, heavy storms, winds, just freezing temperatures in the 30s. This little boy, if he was out there without a coat, without a jacket, just a shirt and a pair of jeans and some sneakers, I mean, goodness sakes alive. They've combed through the wooded area on horseback. Investigators have looked underneath every rock and every crevice. They have not found any trace of this young man. Where is he? Where is little Jonathan Foster?
Dr. Radha Miklanamy, doctor of internal medicine, joining us from Washington, D.C. If this little boy, he didn't have a coat, he had his T-shirt on, can he withstand the conditions for these days?
Well, he could. I mean, this is not below zero temperatures. He's not going to have overexposure, but it's going to be more difficult if he were traumatized or unconscious, lying somewhere to be found. And he certainly will be in a less, in not as good of a position as if the weather were better.
Along the train tracks and through the thick brush near Garden Oaks.
Everybody good?
A search for a missing boy grows more desperate by the hour. 12-year-old Jonathan Foster, who vanished from his Northwest Houston neighborhood on Christmas Eve.
Okay, we gotta find out why the child was at the babysitter when the stepfather was home. That's key. Also, the phone call that was allegedly made to the mother at work, if her employer has some sort of way of tracking or verification of incoming phone calls, perhaps the phone call telephone number could be traced. But something is just not right here, because maybe the child left the babysitter with the coat on, went home, took the coat off, and went outside. But something clearly is leading back to the child going home and meeting up with the stepfather. Something's just not right here.